What's up, gamers? I'm the Lights, and we've got GM Nightfalls rolling out early this season in Destiny, and they're starting us off strong with the Lightblade GM this week, which will be dropping the Wendigo GL3 grenade launcher, and we're going to go over the best rolls for Wendigo and how to get through the Lightblade as quickly and painlessly as possible. So first, let's talk about Wendigo, which I've talked about before since it's been around a while. It's an arc 120 RPM adaptive frame grenade launcher, and heavy grenade launchers remain without a niche at the moment, being an inferior option in DPS and total damage compared to just about every other viable DPS strategy. But as far as DPS grenade launchers go, Wendigo does get some great rolls, probably the best rolls, as well as some good PvP rolls where grenade launchers are still quite good in PvP. Since you'll likely not be in a position to be too picky about the rolls on this gun, don't sweat the barrel and masterwork too much, so just spec best available for handling and velocity. However, I'd say spike grenades are a requirement for PvE, and proximity grenades I'd call a requirement for PvP. There's a lot of potentially useful perks here for PvE, and for PvP you don't need to be too terribly picky on the major perks actually, but the best possible role for PvP is definitely going to be Impulse Amplifier with Rangefinder for just a ton of velocity. For PvE, Explosive Light is a class above every other option for DPS and total damage, which pairs well with Autoloading Holster and maybe Field Prep, Clown Cartridge, or Impulse Amplifier. Now onto the strike itself. Lightblade is one of the hardest GMs in the game. In my opinion, it shares the S tier of Nightfall difficulty with strikes like the Corrupted and the Mars Heist Battlegrounds. But we haven't seen this strike since we got Strand in the game and our new champion stunning capabilities. As it turns out, the 2 Lucent Hive in the middle of this strike, where you open the door, can be suspended, but the other 4 you'll have to deal with cannot be suspended. But suspend is still fantastic, so we'll be abusing it like crazy. In this place, you'll be facing Unstoppable and Barrier champions and Arc threat, and you'll be bolstered by Void and Arc Singes, as well as Overcharge Grenade Launcher. For team composition, it doesn't really matter what class setup you have, but the 2 best subclasses for this place, in my opinion, are Night Stalker and Berserker. Night Stalker has always been a great pick for this place since Omnioculus Invis spam can allow you to essentially skip a few encounters, and it also makes getting clutch reses in the more hectic parts of the strike much easier. Berserker is, to me, the best subclass in the game for GMs currently. All of the Strand subclasses can have quite good uptime on Suspend, which is just broken in GMs in general, but Titan does it the most safely and consistently, while also frequently applying Woven Mail to themselves and the team for added survivability. If we run both a Night Stalker and a Berserker, this leaves us with very little damage in our composition, however, since these 2 subclasses are mostly focused on utility. So our 3rd slot is best filled by something with high uptime on high potency damage abilities. The clear choice for this to me are Voidwalker and Striker, since they'll be bolstered by the Arc and Void Surges. This is because of their uber buffed grenade spam with great uptime from either Controverse Hold for Void Locks or Heart of Inmost Light for Arc Titans. This build combination is more of a template, however, and you can use quite a few different things to fit into each of the 3 kind of roles. In place of the Strand Titan, you could easily have a Strand Hunter with Aeons, or even 6 Coyote for more ensnaring slams if someone else is already running Aeons. Strand Warlock can also work fine with Aeons again, or even the Cenotaph Mask with something like Divinity or the Navigator. I think the Strand player running a heavy ammo generating exotic like Aeons or Cenotaph is ideal, just because I feel they lose less from losing their exotics than the other builds do. But your Void Hunter can also for sure run Aeons. If you don't have a Void Hunter, you can run a lot of different things there to fill the Void Hunter slot, but I wouldn't recommend doing multiple Strand players, since a single well thought out Strand build can easily lock down plenty of area, so you'll want some more damage instead of that, in my opinion. To fill this role, we already talked about Arc Titan and Void Warlock, but you could also run Void Titan. Or if you have multiple hunters, the other hunters can also play Night Stalker with a more slaying focused build like Gerfalcons or even Arc with Assassin's Cowl. Arc Hunter, while extremely potent, is a very punishing build to play in GM since you need to get in close, so I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but if you have the chops to make it work, it does a ton. For weapons, most of the encounters in Lightblade are actually fairly long range, but the weapons with artifact support for Barrier and Unstoppable are rather limited in terms of range, which makes weapons a little tricky. Wishender remains a fantastic option for its good range and damage, as well as its ability to intrinsically one-tap barrier shields even on GM difficulty. For the heavy weapons that you'll be making ammo for with Aeons or Cenotaph, I recommend rockets for this place. Rockets do huge damage to champions, and Aeons should be able to keep ammo topped up. The trickier encounters in Lightblade, like the boss room, require you to be mobile, so sitting and shooting for extended periods of time with a machine gun or linear fusion rifle is less than ideal and makes rockets highly preferable in my opinion. But you can definitely make any of the other options work if that's your preference. Forbearance is a gun that will rip all of the trash heads in this place to pieces, and I definitely have someone on your team run one. For other special weapons, the stock option of hand cannon for unstop and arbalist for barrier is there, as is an auto rifle and a chill clip fusion to basically do the same thing. Though with the fusion setup, it wouldn't be the first thing I'd recommend since you'll be lacking a lot of range. There are some other options that have high potential here. For example, Risk Runner, thanks to its ability to help mitigate arc damage and get charged off of the tons of arc damage in the strike. There's also Trinity Ghoul, which has a ton of potential. These two options are harder to recommend though because of the fact that they are of course exotic and lack relevant champion stunning capabilities. Ideally, you have at least one source of champion stunning coming from a hyper consistent source like a primary weapon or arbalest, but you also have at least two sources of champion stunning per champion type on your entire team. The more the better, as long as you're not sacrificing slaying potential. I would do everything in your power to not run double primary, for example. Now to get into the strike. As soon as you load in, there's already some nice tech we can use. You used to be able to plank away at the boss from safety until he teleported away, and then have your Invis Hunter run all the way into the building to despawn the ads without losing platinum. Now it seems that this does compromise your platinum rating, so to modify the strat a little bit, I'd recommend still plink plonking the boss until he despawns, and then dealing with the two barrier champs with suspend and heavy ammo, hopefully getting Aeon finishers for drops off of them. After that, you can make your way in, and this first room inside the building can be quite deadly with two Lucent Hive Lightbearers. These two Lucent Hive Lightbearers cannot be suspended, and there will be two barrier champions in this room as well that can be suspended. Start by dealing with the wizards that spawn in nearest to the door, and then working on the champs and the Hive Guardian, getting finishers if possible. At a certain point, a second Lucent Hive will spawn in the middle platform by the door, which can catch you off guard. I believe this spawn happens off of killing the two barrier champions or the Lucent Hive, but I really don't know, quite honestly. What I do know is you should respect the Lucent Hive Guardians. Shield throws can absolutely one-shot you. Suppressor grenades can absolutely one-shot you. They hurt really bad. Once you're through though, we have a bit of time before anything gets too dicey again. The next point in the strike that could cause trouble is opening the doors for the ferry. I'd recommend doing each side as a team until you're comfortable with taking out the Lightbearer Hive by yourself without needing to use huge amounts of heavy ammo. Luckily for us, these Lightbearers actually can be suspended, so do that and focus them down as a team. Immediately after you open the door, we'll be in a big open area where you really have two ways to go about it. Option number one is to just take it slow, jump off the ferry to either side, and slowly move up with help from cover. On the ferry, you are quite exposed, and things like wells, rifts, and barricades won't stick to the ferry and instead will be left behind as the ferry keeps moving. The other option is to have an Omnioculus Night Stalker keep the entire team invisible on the ferry the whole time and just AFK through this section since there are no champions, so you don't lose anything by skipping it. Once you're through the big open area, you will definitely want to jump off the ferry to the ledges in front of you and just deal with the mass amounts of thrall that jump onto the ferry. The swamp section is up next, and this one can be a little bit tricky. We've got kind of two main ways you can go about this, either by abusing Omnioculus invisibility spam yet again like we did on the ferry, or you can just work through it slowly and methodically, focusing down targets with your team and keeping your head on a swivel for Screebs, Other Scorn, and the Moths. The rest of the strike isn't really a huge issue until you get into the boss room, which, as per usual, is the hardest part of the strike. In the boss room, you'll have a ton of orbs fall from the sky and litter the arena. The boss flies in, and you'll have a few distinct phases to this fight. Starting off, you'll just have the boss and some thrall. The boss hurts a lot, but he's not very aggressive at this point, so you can kite him around fairly easily, and if you're careful, you can gobble up a ton of the orbs in the middle and get most, if not all, of your super back. And this can be done throughout the fight as well. But you will want to stick to the upper ledges for the most part, since there's the most cover up there. It is in your best interest to stay moving throughout this entire boss fight. For this first phase, you only need to get the boss's health down to the first breakpoint. No real other objective here. You're going to be doing this slowly and methodically for the most part, but you could use heavy and supers here since you'll have plenty of potential Aeons targets throughout the rest of this fight, and you also have all the free orbs. Once the threshold is reached, you'll have 2 beefy sword knights and a lucent hive spawn in on the middle platform. This lucent hive cannot be suspended, which is a bummer, but the 2 sword knights most definitely can. It is in your best interest to nuke all 3 of these targets as soon as they spawn in, because if they start running around all over the place, they can become an issue and can end up covering a lot of ground and making a lot of the arena dangerous. Getting heavy finishers off of them is great, but you're pretty close to the end at this point, so make sure you're still playing your life. Once those are all dealt with, we get to what I would call the crux of this boss fight. The boss will become damageable again, and 2 barrier champions and a handful of acolytes will spawn. Focus on staying safe from the boss and dealing with the champions with suspension and heavy ammo. Once the barriers are dealt with, you'll have another pair of barriers that spawn when the boss's health drops below half, which you'll deal with the same way. Once the boss's health is at the next breakpoint, you'll get another wave of 2 yellow bar sword knights and a light bearer. Same deal here, the light bearer cannot be suspended, but you're going to want to get rid of all 3 quickly yet again. Doing so will have the boss become vulnerable for the final time. You'll have 2 more barrier champions. You're going to deal with those just as you did before, quickly and methodically, and then you just finish off the boss. This strike is a tough one. Just go in focused and confident, not to the point of arrogance, of course. The enemies in this strike can down you faster than most people are going to be used to. That said, though, anyone can get this done, and it is one of the better feeling strikes to complete because of the challenge. But that's going to wrap up Lightblade and week 1 of GMs this season. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe for more content like this. Like the video if you liked it, and comment what you've had success with in the Lightblade. Thanks, everyone. Deuces.